The paper her father kept at the bottom of his tool chest had been folded so long that it split along the creases when she opened it, and Kezia Furlong had to hold the 4 pieces flat on the counterpane before she could read what was printed there. It was a column cut out of the Weald Advertiser, dated the 8th of October, 1808, 9 years old. Gone the color of weak tea, creased into quarters by a man who had taken it out and looked at it a great many more times than he had ever admitted to anybody. "Read it," her father said. "I can see what it is. Read it out to me. I want to hear it in a voice that isn't mine." So she read it out in the low room over the Ockenden oast, where Samuel Furlong had slept for 31 years, with the window open on a hot July night and the moths coming in at the candle. A statement by His Grace the Duke of Ockenden, that the engagement lately subsisting between himself and Miss Selina Verrall of Sember Green was at an end, that the ending of it was by his own act and his own free choice, that no blame of any kind whatever attached to Miss Verrall, who had behaved throughout with perfect propriety, and that any person repeating one word to her discredit would answer for it to him. That since the fire on his drying floor in the September last, he was not a man any woman could reasonably be asked to marry. That he had told her so himself, and that she had been entirely right to agree with him. Signed with his own name, printed at his own charge, and read aloud by him standing up unassisted in the parish church at Little Sember, in front of something better than 200 people, on the Sunday following. Kezia set the 4 pieces down and squared their edges with her thumb, because her hands wanted something to do. "That's 9 years old," she said. "It is. Why have you kept it?" Her father did not answer at once. He had been dying since the middle of June, slowly and then not slowly, and the doctor from Sember had stopped coming because there was nothing left to charge for. In the daytime he was querulous about small things, the drought, the flies, whether the No. 3 kiln had been swept. At night he was clear as glass, and it frightened her more than the querulousness did, because it is a lie, he said, and I am the reason for it. She waited. Outside the window the 5 white cowls of the oast stood against the dark, unmoving, because there was no wind and there were no hops yet, only the bines heavy and green on their poles in the great garden and the 15-acre, and the long slope of Puxty, 320 acres of the best hop land in the Weald of Kent, coming on to the finest crop she had seen in her life. "You know how I got this," her father said, and turned his left hand over on the sheet. The hand was a claw. The tendons had drawn up when the burn healed, and the fingers had never opened again, and for 9 years he had worked the drying floor one-handed and complained about nothing, and every man on the ground had accepted it as one of those things that happen to a drier. "You were in the oast when it caught," she said, "in the September of 1808. You got yourself out. I did not get myself out." The candle guttered. She put her hand up to shield it without thinking, and the light steadied. "There were 3 of us on the floor," he said. "Me and Jarvis Coldman, and a lad from Sember whose name I have made myself forget. The green hops were in, and I had the fires up too high. Because I was in a hurry, because I was always in a hurry then. The cloth took. When cloth takes, it does not burn like a fire, Kezia. It goes across the floor like water going across a table, and the floor is 10 feet above the fire, and it is made of laths and haircloth, and there is nothing under you but the kiln. Father, I went down through it. My leg went through first, and then the rest of me, and I hung there over the fire by this arm, and I was cooking, and I could hear myself doing it." He said it flatly, the way he said everything about work. And a man came up the stairs into a kiln that was alight, and got hold of me, and pulled me out through the drop hole, and he got hold of Jarvis Coldman as well, and he went back a third time for the lad from Sember, and there was nothing to be got. He came out the third time with his coat gone, and his face gone, and his hands the way you have seen his hands. Kezia found she had stopped breathing. "The Duke," she said. He was 23. His father had been under the ground a fortnight. He had come down to the oast to ask me a fool question about the sulphur, and he was standing in the door when the cloth went. Her father's mouth moved. And I never said so. In 9 years I never once said so out loud. To anybody. In any company. Not at the funeral. Not at the inquest for the lad. Not in the Ockenden Arms when they were saying he had set it himself for the insurance, which they did say, for 2 years, until they got tired of it and started saying the other thing instead. Why? Because it was my fire, he said. I had the fires up. It was my floor and my cloth and my hurry, and if I stood up in the Ockenden Arms and said the Duke carried me out of it, the next question is, who put me in it? And I had a wife and 2 daughters and a tied cottage and a name in this county that was worth money at the borough, and I was a coward, and I let a man who could not defend himself carry that as well. He looked at the ceiling. He never asked me to speak. Not once. Not in 9 years. He asked me about the sulphur and the drying and whether the 3 flue was drawing. And he never asked me for the one thing that would have cost him nothing to ask for. The moths went on at the candle. Somewhere below them in the oast a mouse was working at something. So that is why I keep the paper, her father said. He put his own name in the county paper and said he was not fit to be married to, so that a lady who had run away from his face would not have to carry a single unkind word for it. And every soul in 4 parishes read it and believed him, because a man does not say a thing like that about himself unless it is true. They are not afraid of him, Kezia, do you understand me? That is the whole of it. Nobody in the Weald is afraid of the Duke of Ockenden. They are sorry for him. They have been sorry for him for 9 years, and it has taken his ground and his tenants and his word at market and everything else a man has, and a county can kill you with pity a great deal more thoroughly than it can with hate. She sat still on the hard chair by the bed and looked at the 4 pieces of paper. You want me to speak, she said. After? No. Then what? Speaking is worth nothing now. 9 years too late is worse than never. It only makes a man look as if he had to be argued into his own life. Her father moved his good hand across the sheet until he found her wrist, and shut on it, and his grip was still a drier's grip, hard and dry and hot. Listen to me. Come the 1st of September there will be the finest crop of hops on this ground that I have seen since I was a boy, and no man to dry it, and no pickers to pick it, because they all went to Sember Green last year and they will all go to Sember Green again. He will lose it on the bine. And when he loses it, he loses the bond, and when he loses the bond, Silas Otway takes the great garden and the 15-acre and puxty and turns 320 acres to sheep. And there is an end of Little Sember and everybody in it. I am not a man, Kezia said. You are a better drier than I ever was, and you have been one since you were 19. And every picking family from Bermondsey to Cranbrook knows the name over that oast door. His grip tightened. That is what I have got to give him. Not a speech. The name. Swear to me you will take it up to the house and give it to him, and that you will not let anybody, not your mother, not me, not the whole parish stood in the road, talk you out of it. Father, swear it, Kezia. She looked at his ruined hand on the sheet, and at the 4 pieces of paper, and at the window with the 5 white cowls standing still against the dark. I swear it, she said. Samuel Furlong died at 20 minutes past 4 the next morning, the 9th of July, 1817, while she was down in the stokehole raking out No. 2 because it needed doing, and because she could not sit in the room any longer. She heard Nell call from the stairhead, and she came up with the rake still in her hand, and that was the last thing her father ever gave her. That small, unimportant thing to be ashamed of for the rest of her life. They buried him on the 12th at Little Sember in a churchyard so full of furlongs that the sexton had to think about where to put him. The whole ground came. The Duke of Ockenden did not come, and Kezia understood exactly why, and hated the understanding. Her mother went home from the burying and put the kettle on and said, well, and that was the whole of Hannah Furlong's mourning, done in public for the next 4 months. It was 3 days after that, over the ironing, that Kezia told her. You will not, her mother said. I gave him my word. He was dying and he was wandering and he wanted a grand end to his life. He got one. Now let it lie. Hannah set the iron down on the trivet with a crack. You are 26 years old. You have a good trade and no husband and the whole of Michaelmas coming, and you want to go up that drive and offer yourself to a man the entire county laughs at? They do not laugh at him. They laugh at him, Kezia. They are kind about it. That is worse. I know it is worse. Then you know what they will do to you. Her mother's face did not move. Hannah Furlong had a face like a shut door, and had had one since 1808. They will not hate you. They will be sorry for you too. They will say, there goes poor Furlong's daughter, who had to take what she could get, and they will say it in a soft voice at the church gate for the rest of your life, and when you are dead, they will say it over you. I would rather see you go to Otway's ground and pick for a shilling. Mother, we are out of this cottage at Michaelmas anyway, Hannah said, so you may as well know that as well. Mr. Pashley sent up the paper on Tuesday. The cottage goes with the drier's place, and there is no drier. Kezia looked at her. Then there is nothing to lose, she said, is there? She went up on the last Thursday in July, on foot, in her working boots, with her father's 4 pieces of paper in her pocket, and her hands still stained brown from the last of the seed hops. Because she had been out in the great garden since 5 in the morning, looking at bines that nobody had asked her to look at, counting the burr and the setting, and adding it up in her head, and what the arithmetic came to was the finest crop in 12 years and no one alive to take it off. If you are still with me here at the foot of the Ockenden Drive, do take a moment to subscribe, because everything I have told you so far is only how Kezia Furlong came to be walking up that hill. The 21 days that follow are the reason I wanted to tell this story at all. Ockenden Hall stood at the head of its own valley, with the hop grounds coming up to it on 3 sides like a green sea, and the first thing anybody noticed about it was that the windows were clean. All of them. 41 tall windows on the south front, every one of them washed, and the gravel raked, and the stone urns planted, and not one carriage track in the sweep older than the rain. Nobody came. But the house was kept as though somebody might. The footman who opened the door had grey in his hair and no gloves on, and he looked at her boots and her stained hands and said, Quite gently. The kitchen door is round by the yew walk, my dear. I am Samuel Furlong's daughter, Kezia said, and I have come to see the Duke. That changed things, though not quickly. She was put in a chair in the passage outside the estate room for 3/4 of an hour. And in that 3/4 of an hour, she learned more about Ockenden than she had learned in 26 years of living on its ground. Through the open door on her left, she could see into the great hall, where the marble was black and white and the paneling was pale, and there were gilt frames all the way up the staircase, and where somebody had stacked 11 coarse hop pockets against the wall under the family portraits, because the store at the oast had been full since the poor year, and there was nowhere else dry to put them. 11 pockets of last year's hops, 150 weight apiece, unsold, going brown, standing in the finest room in the Weald. And through the door on her right, she could hear 2 men talking about the Duke of Ockenden as though he were a horse. He will not have it. He never will have it. Then we do not ask him. We put it before him done. Kezia sat with her hands in her lap and understood that the second voice belonged to somebody who had been managing this house for a long time, and that the first voice belonged to somebody who had given up. At 11:30, a door opened at the far end, and a man came down the passage, and Kezia stood up and had her first proper look at Rafe Anstey, 4th Duke of Ockenden. He was tall, and he came down the passage on the left-hand side of it, close in to the wall, the way a man walks who has spent 9 years arranging which half of himself the world gets. The right side of his face was a good face, and unremarkable, and 36 years old. The left side, from the jaw up across the cheekbone and into the hair above the ear, was old-heeled burn, silvered and smooth and long since knitted, the skin drawn a little at the corner of the eye so that the eye did not quite close and did not quite rest. His left hand was in a black glove, and the fingers of it were stiff. He wore a plain black coat and a white cravat tied without any interest at all, and he was carrying a hop-bine. He had cut it somewhere out on the ground and brought it in with him, 4 feet of it, and he was looking at the burr as he walked. He stopped when he saw her. He did not turn the good side towards her. That was the thing she noticed, and she noticed it before she noticed anything else. He stood square and let her look, and waited to see what she would do with it, the way a man holds still for a dog he has decided not to run from. "You are Furlong's daughter," he said. "Kezia Furlong, Your Grace." "I was sorry not to come on the 12th. He said it without any softening at all. "I did not come because your mother would have had to be civil to me at her husband's grave, and I would not put that on her. If that was wrong, I am sorry for that too." Nobody had told her he would speak like that. She had been told he was silent and gruff and half mad and shut up in a dark room, and what he was instead was exact and unhurried and entirely without any expectation of being answered. "It was not wrong," Kezia said. "Good." He held out the bine. "The burr on Puxty. Look at it and tell me the truth and not the other thing." She took it. The bine was heavy and the cones were coming on well, tight and pale green and sticky, and she rolled one between finger and thumb and split it with her thumbnail and looked at the yellow dust in the heart of it, and smelt her own hand. 3 weeks, she said. Give or take 4 days for the weather. And it is the best I have seen since 1805. That is what I thought, the Duke said, and there is nobody left on this estate who will tell me whether I am right, so thank you. Then he said, Mr. Pashley will have told you why you were kept waiting, and walked past her into the estate room, and Mr. Pashley shut the door. They had her in half an hour later, and put the arithmetic in front of her, and she did not once look away from it, and afterwards she thought that had been her real interview. 320 acres in hop. To pick it in the 21 days before the cones went over, you wanted 200 pickers on the ground and 40 more for the poles and the bins and the carting. In 1816 they had got 41. Otway at Sember Green had got 600, and had turned 200 of them away, and had sent them up the Ockenden road on purpose, so that the Duke could watch them go past his own gate. 5 kilns in the oast, 2 of them cracked in the ironwork since the fire and never properly made good, and a bond for £9,000, taken up in 1811 to rebuild the drying floor and buy the poles after the bad year, held now by Silas Otway, hop factor, of Southwark and Sember Green, and falling due at Michaelmas. He will take the ground, Mr. Pashley said. He was 70, and he had the estate books open at 3 places at once, and he did not look at his master while he spoke. He does not want the money, your grace, he has never wanted the money. He wants the great garden, and he wants Puxty, and he wants to be the only man selling Weald hops at the Borough in the spring, and by Michaelmas he will have all 3, unless this crop comes off, and goes to market at a fair price. Then it comes off, the Duke said. With what hands? Nobody answered that. Kezia looked at the sunlight lying across the estate room table, and at the 11 pockets she could see through the doorway, and she said, They will come for a furlong. Both men looked at her. The picking families are the same families every year, she said. Bet Rackstraw's lot out of Bermondsey, and the Doggets, and 24 families out of Southwark and Deptford, and then the local people from Sember and Cranbrook and Goudhurst. They came to this ground for 30 years because my father was on the kiln, and they knew they would be dealt fair, and their hops would not be thrown out as dirty to shave the tally. They did not leave because of the money, your grace. Otway pays a shilling for 4 bushels, and here it was a shilling for 5, and they still came, until 1815. And in 1815? In 1815, my father was ill through the picking, and the tally was kept by Mr. Otway's man on loan, and 411 bushels went missing out of 1 week's count, and every family on this ground knew it, and no one at this house was told. Kezia kept her voice level. They did not go to Sember Green for the shilling. They went because they were robbed here, and nobody came out of the big house to say a word about it. The room was very quiet. I did not know that, the Duke said. No, your grace. You would not have been told. Why not? Because you are pitied, Kezia said, and nobody tells a thing like that to a man they are sorry for. She heard Mr. Pashley draw his breath in. She watched the Duke of Ockenden take that full in the face without moving a muscle of it, and she thought, quite clearly, there it is. That is what 9 years has done. He is not surprised. Go on, he said. Put the Furlong name back over the oast door, and I will go down to Bermondsey myself and fetch them, she said. I can bring 200 onto this ground by the 1st of September. I can dry what they pick, 5 kilns or 3, and I can send it to the borough in a condition that will make a factor lie about the price to get it. That is what I have come to offer, and I am offering it, because my father made me swear on the 9th of July that I would. Swear to what? To pay you what he owed you, Kezia said. Something went across the Duke's face and was put away again. Furlong owed me nothing. He said otherwise, Then he was wrong, said Rafe Anstey, and I will not take payment on a dead man's mistake. You may have the drier's place at £40 a year, and the cottage with it, which is what you came for and what you are worth, and I will thank you every day of the picking. Mr. Pashley, see to it. And Mr. Pashley, who had been waiting the whole morning for exactly this moment, said, That will not answer, your grace. It answers perfectly, it does not. The old steward laid both hands flat on the books. Forgive me, she can be drier, she cannot be the name. A hired drier on this ground is a servant, and if she goes down to Bermondsey as your servant, Otway's man goes down the following morning and offers them a shilling for 3 bushels, and there is an end of it. There is one arrangement in the world that Otway cannot outbid inside 3 weeks, and you know what it is. No, £9,000, sir, at Michaelmas. I said no. Then say it to her, Mr. Pashley said, and not to me, because she is the one who will be out of a cottage at Michaelmas either way. The clock in the passage went on. The Duke of Ockenden stood at the window with his back to the room and his gloved hand shut on the sill, and Kezia Furlong watched the light on the left side of his head, and thought about a young man of 23 going up a burning kiln stair 3 times. Miss Furlong, he said at last, without turning, do you know what was printed in the county paper about me in the October of 1808? I have it in my pocket, your grace. That turned him round. My father kept it in his tool chest for 9 years, she said, and made me read it out to him the night before he died, and then he told me why. So yes, I know what was printed, and I know one other thing about it that nobody in this house knows, and I am not going to trade with it, so you need not look at me like that. Then you know I cannot marry anybody. I know you told a printer so. I told the truth. You told them what you wanted them to believe, Kezia said, which is a different article, and you have been paying for it at 4% for 9 years. Nobody spoke to him like that. She understood that from the way Mr. Pashley went perfectly still, like a man in a room with a lit fuse. I will hear your terms, the Duke said. So she gave them, and she had had them ready since the last Thursday, in July, walking up the hill in her working boots. For, she said, first, it is a bargain and not a kindness, and it lasts until the hops are sold at the borough and the bond is paid, and on the day after that, if you want it undone, I will go quietly and say nothing to anyone for the rest of my life. Second, the drying floor is mine. Not yours, not Mr. Pashley's, not any factor's man. If I say the fires come down at 2 a.m, they come down at 2 a.m, and nobody countermands me on my own floor. Third, the tally is read out loud in the great garden every evening at 6. In front of the whole ground by me, and any picker may come up and hear their own count said out. Every day. All 21. And fourth? Fourth, Kezia said, you will come out on the ground. He looked at her. Every day, she said. In the daylight. Down the rows where 200 people can see you. And up the kiln stairs at night, and into the Ockenden Arms on the Saturday, and you will stand at the borough in September in front of the factors with your own sample in your own hand. That is the fourth, and it is the one I care about. And if you will not do it, then the other 3 are not worth doing, and I will go home and pick for Otway for a shilling. There was a long pause. You drive a hard bargain for a woman with no cottage, said the Duke of Ockenden. I have no cottage, Kezia said, which is exactly why. They were married at Little Sember on the 25th of August, 1817, at 8 in the morning, by license, because there was no time for banns, and because the Duke of Ockenden would not have it said that he had crept round anything. Kezia came to her own wedding in her working clothes. She had not planned it that way. There was a gown of her mother's, laid out on the bed at the cottage, plain and grey-blue and perfectly good. But the first of the seed hops off Puxty had come in on the Sunday, 4 loads of them, earlier than any crop had a right to, and green hops do not wait. Leave them in the bin overnight and they heat, and by morning they are brown and stinking and worth nothing. So she had lit no 4 on the Sunday afternoon, and she had been on the drying floor from 3 o'clock on the Monday morning, turning them with the scuppet, and at 7:30 she was still on the floor because the load was not made, and at 7:45 Nell came running up the kiln stair and said the bells had started. So she came down the stair and went across the yard and up the lane to the church with her sleeves rolled, in a plain oatmeal muslin, with the hem burnt through in one place, with a coarse brown hop sacking apron still tied over it, and her hands and her forearms stained the deep resinous yellow-brown that no soap on earth will shift in August, and a smear of charcoal ash across her cheek where she had pushed her hair back, and her hair coming out of its pins with the heat of the floor. And the church was empty. Not entirely. Mr. Pashley was there, and Mrs. Brenchley the housekeeper, and old Jarvis Coldman, and Nell. 4. Mr. Cobb the parson and the clerk, and 2 men off the ground who had been fetched in to make up the numbers, and stood at the back with their hats in their hands, looking as though they had been caught at something. Her mother did not come. Hannah Furlong had said what she was going to say over the ironing, and she was a woman who only ever said things once. And the whole of the rest of the Weald did not come, though the Weald had been sent word, and the Weald had a great deal to say about it afterwards at the church gate, and in the Ockenden Arms, and in 3 drawing rooms at Sember Green. What the Weald said was not cruel. That was the thing Kezia had known would happen, and had still not been ready for. Nobody at all said anything cruel. They said it was very sad. They said the poor man had got what he could get, and so had she. They said that the Duke's aunt had come down from town, and been seen to leave again the same afternoon, and that Lady Selina had not been observed to change countenance at all when she was told. Outside the Lyke gate, 2 of Silas Otway's men sat on the wall the whole time, with their legs swinging, eating bread and cheese, watching, not saying a word. They had been sent to be seen, and they were being seen. Kezia signed the register, with a hand stained brown to the wrist. The pen slipped in her fingers twice, and Mr. Cobb waited, and she got it done. Then she stood in the porch in the flat, bright morning light, with a Duke beside her and 9 people behind her, and looked down the empty path to the empty gate. "You should have had your gown," Rafe Anstey said quietly. "The load was not made." "I know. Coldman told me at 7. I could have held it an hour. Then it would have been a brown load and 11 pounds gone, on a day when we have not got 11 pounds, Kezia said, and everyone at that gate would have said the drier's daughter could not even keep a kiln right on her wedding morning. Let them say the other thing. I would rather be laughed at for the apron than for the hops." He looked at her for a moment. "I have been laughed at for 9 years, he said, It is not as bad as they think, but it is not nothing either, and I am sorry to have put you in the way of it. I walked into it, Your Grace." "Rafe," he said, "if we are going to be looked at, we may as well be accurate about it." They went back down the lane to the oast, and she was on the drying floor again by 9:20, with her ring in her apron pocket, because the hop resin would have blackened it. And the load was made at 11:30, and it was a good load, pale gold and springing back in the hand, and that was her wedding day. The Ockenden oast stood at the bottom of the yard where it had stood since 1738. A long 2-storied storehouse with 5 round kilns built along the back of it, each kiln with its white timber cowl turning on its spindle to face away from the wind. From the top of the great garden it looked like 5 white birds standing in a row with their heads all turned the same way. Every child in the Weald was told they were birds. Kezia had believed it until she was 7. Inside, a kiln is very simple and entirely unforgiving. At the bottom is the fire, in a brick chamber, and on the fire you burn charcoal, because charcoal makes heat without smoke, and smoke taints a hop past selling. 10 feet above the fire is the drying floor, laths, and over the laths a haircloth, and on the haircloth 2 feet of green hops, and above them the cone of the roof and the cowl to draw the air through. You spread the load, you sulphur it, you keep the fire even for 10 or 11 hours. You turn the load once with a wooden scuppet, walking on a floor that is a cloth over a fire. Then you take the hops off while they are hot and lay them on the cooling floor for 12 hours to come back to themselves. And then you press them into a pocket with the treader. And then you do it again, and you do it again every day and every night for 3 weeks without stopping, because behind you 200 people are pulling green hops off the bine faster than any 5 kilns in Kent can dry them. Get the fire too low, and the load will not make. Get it too high and you scorch, and a scorched hop goes red, and the factor will not have it. Take the load off 5 minutes early, and the stalk in the middle of the cone is still damp, and the pocket heats in the store. And in November a man in Southwark opens it, and finds a mould, and the whole crop's name is gone for 10 years. Her father had taught her the test when she was 9 years old. You take a handful of hops off the floor, and you close your fist on them hard, and you let go. If they lie flat and dead in your palm, they are not there yet. If they spring back and stand up and the stalk snaps clean between your fingers with a little dry crack like a wren's bone, then she is made, and you take her off, and you do not argue with her. She's made. It was the only sentence Samuel Furlong had ever said with any pleasure in it. Kezia went over the whole oast on the 26th with Jarvis Coldman, who had been 60 then and was 69 now, and who had one arm that worked properly, and they found what she already knew they would find. No 1 and no 2 were sound, no 4 and no 5 were sound, and had new ironwork from 1811. No 3 had a fault in the flue. It was not a crack you could see. Her father had found it in 1812 and had never reported it, because reporting it meant taking the kiln down, and taking a kiln down in September meant losing 1/5 of the crop, and Samuel Furlong had decided he could ride it. What happened was this: with the wind anywhere in the northeast, the draw through no. 3 reversed for a few seconds at a time, and a lick of the fire came up through the drop hole, instead of the heat coming up through the floor. 4 or 5 times a night. Never enough to catch. Always enough to catch. He worked it 11 year like that, Jarvis said. wet cloth over the drop hole and a bucket by his foot, and he never let another man on that floor in a northeaster. Not one all them year. Does his Grace know? Jarvis looked at his boots. His Grace knows the whole of number 3, he said, because his Grace pulled your father out of it in the first place, and he has had it in his head to pull the thing down every year since, and every year your father told him it were sound, and his Grace took his word because it were your father's floor. That is how it has stood. Kezia stood in the cold, empty kiln, in the smell of 9 years of old charcoal and sulphur and hop dust, and looked up at the drop hole and the black timber above it. Then we run 4 kilns, she said. 4 won't take it, not off 320 acre. 4 will take it if we run them properly and I do not sleep. And if we get a northeaster and you are stood on number 3 anyway, Jarvis said, because we are 11 loads behind and there is nothing else for it, which we will be. Come the 2nd week. What then, missus? Then I will be stood on it, Kezia said, and not you, and not him. That is what the 2nd term was for. She went up to London on the 27th, on the carrier's cart to Maidstone, and the coach from there, and she took Nell with her for the look of the thing and Jarvis Coldman for the sense of it. The hop-picking families of Bermondsey were not a charity, and did not care to be treated as one. They were dockers and tanners, and their wives and their mothers, and for 3 weeks in September they went down into Kent in a body, 40 and 50 families at a time, and lived in huts on the ground, and earned in 21 days what would carry them through to Christmas. They chose their ground in August. Once they had chosen, they did not change. Bet Rackstraw ran 19 of those families out of one street off Snowsfields, and had done since her mother died, and she heard Kezia out on her own doorstep in front of about 40 people, with her arms folded and her sleeves rolled, and did not offer her a chair. Sam Furlong's girl. Yes, I heard he went. I'm sorry for it. She said it and meant it, and moved straight on. And I hear you married the burnt Duke a Monday, which is your business and no one else's, and I hear you want us at Ockenden on the 1st, which is mine. Otway's man was down this street on the 19th, shilling for 4 bushel and a shilling on the hut. I will not beat that, Kezia said. Somebody laughed. Bet Rackstraw did not. Then you have come a long way to say very little. A shilling for 5 bushel, Kezia said, which is what my father paid, and what you came for 30 years. And the huts rethatched before you come, which is being done this week, and dry straw, and a load of faggots to every hut every 3rd day. And Mr. Prentice from Cranbrook to come up to the ground twice in the 3 weeks and once more if he is sent for paid by the house. Otway gives a doctor. Otway gives a doctor to the ground, and Otway's doctor does not come. I have asked. He came twice in 1816, and both times he was on Sember Green's own account, and would not cross to the picking huts. Kezia let that sit. And the last thing, Mrs. Rackstraw, is the one I have come for. The tally will be read out loud in the great garden every evening at 6 o'clock by me, in front of the whole ground. Every family's count, set out in the open air, where anyone may hear it and anyone may say wrong. All 21 days. The street went quiet. Say that again, Bet Rackstraw said. Every count. Said out loud every evening. And who is going to say it? I am. I am the drier, and I have the 4th term of my own marriage settlement in writing, and it says the tally is mine and no factor's man touches it. Bet Rackstraw unfolded her arms, 411 bushel, she said. I know. Do you? Do you know what it is? To stand in a field in the wet with your hands cut to pieces and your back gone and hear a man in a dry coat say you have picked 2/3 of what you have picked, and know there is not one soul in the whole of Kent you can say so to? Her voice had not risen. That was the frightening part. That is not the money. My people would have took the money off you and said nothing. That was being called a liar by a man with a book. I know, Kezia said. It happened on my father's ground while my father was in his bed, and he knew, and he did not stand up in the road and say so, because he was ill and because he was frightened for his place. He told me so on the 9th of July with about an hour left in him, and it is the last thing he ever said to me that mattered. She held the older woman's eye. So it is going to be read out loud, Mrs. Rackstraw, every evening, for as long as I am alive and on that ground. It is not a favor. It is what I owe you, and it is 900 days late. Nobody in Snowsfield said anything for a while. 6 o'clock, Bet Rackstraw said, in the open, where we can all hear it. 6 o'clock. And the burnt Duke, he will be there, Kezia said, standing in the middle of it, in the daylight, where everybody can see him. That is in the settlement, too. Bet Rackstraw looked at her for a long moment, and then did an extraordinary thing. She turned round to the 40 people in the street behind her, and said Ockenden, and went indoors. They came down on the last day of August, 19 families out of Snowsfields, and 11 more out of Deptford, who had heard it in the Borough Market on the Thursday, and the Doggets, and the Cranbrook people, and the whole of Little Sember, and by the evening of the 31st there were 211 pickers in the huts on Ockenden ground, and the smoke of 40 cooking fires going up straight in the still air, and somebody playing a fiddle very badly by the top of Puxty. Silas Otway heard about it at Sember Green before dark, and did not say anything, and sent a man to Maidstone in the morning. The picking began at first light on the 1st of September 1817. It is difficult to explain what a hop harvest is to anybody who has not stood in one. Kezia had stood in 26 of them, and it still took her breath on the first morning. The bines run 12 feet up the poles in rows, and the pole pullers go ahead with the hook and lay the whole bine down across the bin, and the pickers strip the cones off it into the canvas with both hands, and the smell comes up off it so strong and so green and so bitter that it makes your eyes water and your head go light. And by 10 in the morning every hand on the ground is stained brown to the elbow, and every mouth is talking at once. 211 people, in rows in the sun, singing something filthy about a bishop. And the bins fill, and the measurer comes with the basket, and the green hops go into the pokes and on to the wagon, and the wagon comes down the hill to the oast, and there the whole roaring green business of it turns into one quiet woman on a floor above a fire, deciding they were on 4 kilns from the first day, and behind by the second. That was the arithmetic, and there was no way round it. 4 kilns took 12 loads in the 24 hours if you ran them hard, and 211 pickers put 14 or 15 loads on the ground. You cannot ask pickers to slow down, they are paid by the bushel, and they will not. And the cones go over on the bine if you leave them. So it goes into the green store, and the green store heats, and every hour a poke of green hops sits there, it is losing you money, and after a day it is losing you the hop. By the evening of the 3rd of September, They were 9 loads behind, and Kezia Furlong had slept 4 hours in 3 days, and at 11 o'clock that night she came down the kiln stair with the scuppet over her shoulder and found the Duke of Ockenden in the stoke-hole with his coat off, breaking charcoal. "You are on the wrong side of this building," she said. "4th term," he said. "Up the kiln stairs at night. Your words. I meant to be seen. Then I am being seen." He put another basket of charcoal into No. 2 and shut the door on it with his boot. Coldman is 69, and the 2 lads are on the cooling floor, and I have been going up and down my own staircase, doing nothing, since the 25th of August, while my wife has not been to bed. You will find I am a very stupid man, about a great many things, Kezia, but I have not got so stupid that I cannot carry charcoal. He was extremely bad at it for the first 2 nights. His left hand would not shut on the basket handle, and he would not use his teeth on the strap in front of her, so he carried each basket in the crook of his elbow like a child, and made twice as many journeys as he needed to. And on the 2nd night he dropped one on the stones and stood looking at it. Kezia came down the stair, picked the basket up, put it in his good hand, and said, "Left arm underneath, and let it lie on the glove. It is not a grip you want. It is a shelf." He looked at her. "Nobody has told me how to do anything with this hand in 9 years," he said. "They take it off me instead. I am not going to take it off you. I have got 4 kilns and no hands. Left arm underneath." He put his left arm underneath. It worked. That was the beginning of it, and she did not know it was, and neither did he. They found a rhythm by the 5th. 4 hours on and 4 off, turn and turn about, all night, every night. She had the fires and the floor, he had the charcoal and the cooling floor and the pokes, and after the first week he could tell by the sound of the cowl above him which way the wind had gone round, which is a thing most driers never learn. He talked at night. Not in the day. In the day he was on the ground being looked at, and he did that the way a man takes a dose of something, standing in the rows with his hat off and the whole left side of his head in the flat morning light, while 200 people looked their fill. At 6 he stood beside her at the bin head while she read the tally out loud. He did not speak at the tally. He stood and let them see him, and after the first 4 days they stopped looking at him and started looking at their own numbers, which was the entire object. But at 2 in the morning, on a floor above a fire, with the hop dust hanging gold in the lantern light, and the whole world asleep, the Duke of Ockenden talked. He told her about the Poles, and the Ockenden rotation, and his grandmother, who had planted the 15-acre out of spite. He told her the names of the 2 men his father had turned off in 1804, and what had become of them. He asked her about her mother, and listened to the answer, and said afterwards, "She is not wrong to be angry with you. She is only wrong about who she is angry with," which was so exactly true that Kezia had to go and see to a fire that did not need seeing to. And she noticed, on the 9th night, that she had been sitting on his left for a fortnight. She had done it at the first meal, at the long table in the servants' hall because neither of them would eat in the dining room, and she had done it without a thought, because that was the side the light came from and she wanted to see what she was eating. And she had gone on doing it, at every meal, in the cart, on the bench outside the stoke-hole, at 4 in the morning with the tea. On his left, where his ruined eye did not quite close, and his face did not work, and every other living soul in the county arranged themselves, kindly and carefully and always, on his right. On the 13th night he said, out of nothing, with his back to her and both hands on the charcoal basket, "You sit on my left." "I know. Why?" "Because you keep the good side for people you do not trust," Kezia said. "And I would rather you did not have to bother." He did not answer that for a long time. Then he said number 4 wants coal, and went and put coal on it, and when he came back up the stair he sat down on the bench beside her on the wrong side, deliberately, with about 4 inches between them, and neither of them said one word for a quarter of an hour, and Kezia Furlong thought, oh, no. What sent her into the estate room at 3 in the morning on the 14th of September was not curiosity. It was the No. 3 flu. They were 11 loads behind. The weather was holding fine, and the pickers were going through Puxty like a fire through stubble, and 4 kilns could not do it, and sooner or later somebody was going to have to light No. 3. Kezia wanted to know what had actually been done to it in 1811. Not what Jarvis remembered, what had been paid for. If the ironwork had been renewed and the fault was only in the brick, she could line it. If the fault was in the shaft, nothing would save it but taking it down. So she took a candle down to the estate room while the fires were banked, and went along the shelf where Mr. Pashley kept the vouchers, 1809, 1810, 1811, and pulled out the box. The 1811 accounts were there, and they told her what she needed inside 10 minutes. New ironwork to Nos, 4 and 5, brickwork to No. 3, and nothing to the shaft of it at all. She had her answer. She could have gone back up the yard. But the box had a bound file of the county paper wedged down the side of it, the whole of 1808 sewn together with string the way a careful house keeps its own record, and she took it out because she could not help herself, and turned to the 8th of October. The column was there. She had the same column in 4 pieces in a drawer in the drier's cottage, and folded into the gutter of the file where nobody had looked in 9 years because nobody in that house ever opened 1808, were 3 sheets of paper. They were printer's drafts. She knew what they were before she had them flat, because the 3rd of them had the printer's own pencil on it, and a note in the corner, 4 column inches, set Tuesday, and a figure of £2 11 shillings. All 3 were in the same hand. It was a bad hand, cramped and driven hard into the paper, with the letters falling away to the right, and she had been looking at that hand for 3 weeks on kiln notes and poll accounts, and a marriage settlement with 4 terms in it. Rafe Anstey had written it himself. She sat down on the floor of the estate room with the candle beside her, and read all 3, and the last of them, the 2nd draft, was the one that took the ground out from under her. The 1st draft began, "Miss Verrall has written to me that she cannot," and stopped there, scored through so hard the pen had gone into the paper. The 2nd began, "Miss Verrall's letter of the 30th ult. States," and that was scored through too, and under it, in the margin, in the same driven hand, he had written 4 words to himself, and then crossed those out as well, and the 4 words were still legible under the ink. "She is not cruel." And then the 3rd draft, clean, fair copied, exactly as it had gone into the Weald Advertiser, and exactly as her father had made her read it out on the 9th of July. That the ending of it was by his own act and his own free choice, that no blame of any kind whatever attached to Miss Verrall, who had behaved throughout with perfect propriety. Selina Verrall had written to him. She had written first, and she had written something bad enough that a man of 23 with a face 4 weeks out of a fire had sat down and tried 3 times to find a way of printing the opposite of it, and had told himself in the margin that she was not cruel, and had crossed that out too because he did not believe it, and had then put his own name to the lie, and stood up in his own parish church and read it out loud to 200 people. He had not agreed that he was unfit to be married. He had written that he agreed, and paid £2 11 to have it set in type, so that a frightened woman of 20, who had run from his face, would never have to be looked at sideways in a shop in Cranbrook for the rest of her life. Kezia sat on the floor for a long time. Then she put the drafts in her apron pocket, and put the file back, and took the candle up the yard, and went to find her husband. He was in the stoke-hole with no two open and the light of it on the left side of his head, and he looked up and saw her face, and stood. "The floor," he said. "What has happened on the floor?" "Nothing has happened on the floor." She put the 3 sheets into his good hand. He looked down at them. He did not pretend for 1 second not to know what they were, which she was afterwards glad of, because she thought if he had pretended she might have hit him. "You were in the 1811 vouchers," he said. "I was in the 1811 vouchers, and the paper file was in the box, and I am not sorry. No," he turned the sheets over slowly, one and then the next. "I looked for these in 1812. I thought Pashley had burnt them. I have been glad for 5 years that he had. She wrote to you first. She did. What did she write?" "That is hers," he said, "and she does not get to lose it because I could not manage my own paperwork. Rafe, no," he said it quite gently. "You may have everything else. Not that." Kezia stood in the stoke-hole doorway with the September night behind her and the whole ground asleep, and thought about a man on a burning stair, going up a 3rd time. "Then tell me the rest," she said. "Tell me why you put your own name to it." He looked at the fire for a while. "She was 20, he said. "Her father had 140 acres in hop and a mortgage on 90 of them. She had been promised to me since she was 17, and she had never once objected to it, because there was nothing in me to object to. I was a dull young man with a good rent roll, and I had never been unkind to her in my life." He turned one of the drafts over. "And then in September I went up a stair, and I came down it looking like this, and 4 weeks later she came to Ockenden with her aunt, and she sat in the yellow drawing room, and she could not look at me. She tried. That is the part I have never been able to say to anybody. She tried. For about a minute and a half, and then she looked at the carpet, and she stayed looking at the carpet, and she left, and 11 days later she wrote. And you answered it in the county paper. I answered it the way it had to be answered." His voice did not change. "Understand the arithmetic, Kezia, because you are the only person I have ever met who does arithmetic honestly. If it went out that she had thrown me over because of my face, she was finished. There is no forgiveness in this county for a woman who does that. Not from the men, and certainly not from the women. They would have had her out of every drawing room between here and Tunbridge, and her father's 90 acres would have gone the same season, and she would have been 25 and ruined for a thing she did in a room for a minute and a half because she was frightened. And you would have been what? I would have been a man who was jilted, he said. That is a small thing. Men survive it. I had a title and 11,000 acres and a face nobody was going to marry me for anyway. It cost her everything, and it cost me a paragraph. He put the sheets down on the bench. That is what I thought on the 4th of October, 1808, and I was 23, and I was wrong, and I have had 9 years to find out precisely how wrong, and there has never been one single day in the 9 years when I could take it back. Why not? Because she married Silas Otway in the June of 1810, said the Duke of Ockenden. The fire settled in No, too. Kezia felt the whole shape of it come down on her at once, like a floor going. He married the blameless one, Rafe said. That was the entire attraction. Otway had money and no name, and he wanted a wife nobody could say a word about. And there was a young woman in the Weald whose broken engagement had been printed in the county paper over a duke's signature, saying she was faultless. He bought a certificate of character, Kezia, and it had my name on the bottom of it, and I signed it. He looked at his gloved hand. If I stand up now and say that I wrote it and that she wrote to me first, I do not merely take back a paragraph. I take her marriage apart in front of the whole county, 7 years in, and I do it in the same month that her husband is foreclosing on me. Every soul in Kent will say I did it out of spite over £9,000. And they will be half right, because I would be doing it to save my own ground, and the half that is right is the half that would stick. Kezia sat down on the bench. And the sale, she said. And the sale. He almost smiled, and it was worse than if he had not. You have understood it. Hops go at the borough on a sample and a man's word. A factor takes a handful out of the pocket you show him, and then he buys 1,600 more pockets he has never opened, on your word that they are the same. That is the whole trade. It runs on nothing else. He set another basket of charcoal down. There is no man in Southwark who will take the word of the Duke of Ockenden, because the Duke of Ockenden published a statement about his own character in 1808, and every factor in the borough has heard of it. They are not unkind about it. They will bid £2 the hundredweight under the sale, and they will be very sorry about it, and they will say, well, one must be careful, and there is your £9,000 gone. Then we do not sell on your word, Kezia said. There is no other way to sell hops. There is one, she said slowly, and it is not a man's word at all. And it has been standing in the great garden every evening at 6 o'clock for a fortnight, and I have been too tired to see it. Silas Otway made his move on the 16th of September, and it was a good one, and it did not involve a lawyer or a letter or a single word said to anybody's face. He bought the charcoal. Not Ockenden's charcoal. All of it. Every burner in the Weald from Goudhurst to Benenden to Hawkhurst, every clamp standing in every coppice. The whole season's burn, paid for in advance, at a price no man in his senses would refuse, and it was to go to Sember Green and nowhere else. Otway had 600 pickers and 400 acres and 8 kilns, and he did not need a tenth of it. He bought it so that Ockenden could not have it. Kezia found out at 6:20 on the evening of the 16th, when the cart came back from Cranbrook empty, and the carter stood in the yard turning his hat over and would not look at her. Ockenden's got 11 sack in the store, Jarvis Coldman said. 11 sack is a day and a half on 4 kiln, 2 days if we starve 'em, and there are 6 days of picking left. There are 6 days of picking left. Misses, and 9 load in the green store this minute. They stood in the yard in the yellow evening, with 211 people coming down off the hill behind them singing, and the smell of the green hops coming out of the store like a wall. You cannot dry a hop with wood. Wood smokes, and smoke gets into the cone, and a smoked hop is a dead hop. A Southwark factor will find it with his nose from the far side of a warehouse. You cannot dry a hop with coal, not the coal that came into Kent in 1817, because it is full of sulphur of the wrong sort, and it does the same thing worse. Charcoal, and only charcoal, burns hot and clean, and leaves nothing behind it at all. Then we burn our own, Kezia said. Jarvis Coldman looked at her as though she had said they would fly to the moon. That's 4 days in the clamp. 4 days, cut and stacked and turfed and watched. And if she goes up in the night, you have lost the wood and the labor and the 4 days both. How much coppice have we? 50 acre of chestnut in Barnfield, cut in the spring, standing seasoned in the stack. It ain't the want of wood. Then it is the want of hands, Kezia said. And there are 211 pairs of them on this ground. She went up to the great garden at 6 and read the tally out loud, the way she had read it out every evening for 16 days, every family, every count, set out into the open air, with Bet Rackstraw standing at her shoulder with the book, and the Duke of Ockenden standing bare-headed in the middle of it, where everybody could see him. And when the last count was read, she did not stop. She told them the truth, which is not a thing that is often done to 200 pickers standing in a field. She told them about the bond, and about Michaelmas, and about the charcoal, and she named Silas Otway, and she said what would happen to Little Sember and to the huts, and to the 6 days' picking that was still owed to them if the crop went into the store green and stayed there. And then she said that the picking would go on as usual and be paid as usual whatever happened. That was not in question and never had been, and that what she was asking for was the evenings. 4 clamps in Barnfield, she said. Cut wood, stacked and turfed and watched 3 nights and 4 days. It is filthy work, and it is on top of your own day, and I have not got the money to pay you for it before the sale. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Bet Rackstraw said, What do you pay after the sale? 1 shilling a night to every soul that stands a watch, Kezia said, and the same to every soul that cuts, and it is written in the tally book tonight, in front of you. And if there is no sale, there is no shilling, and I will not pretend otherwise. Write it in the book, said Bet Rackstraw. They burned the first 2 clamps on the 17th and 18th of September, in Barnfield Coppice, in the dark, with lanterns hung in the chestnut stools, and 40 people at a time, coming down off the picking to stack and turf and watch. A charcoal clamp is a great dome of cut wood built round a stack pole, and covered over with turf and earth, so that the wood chars instead of burning. And it must be watched every hour of the night, because if the covering falls in anywhere at all, the whole thing takes fire, and 4 days go up in 20 minutes. The old burners from Sember, 3 of them, came over without being asked, and would not be paid, because Otway had bought their season and had not bothered to be civil about it. Hannah Furlong came on the 2nd night. Kezia looked up from the foot of the clamp with a turf in both hands, and her mother was standing there in her black with a covered basket, and she did not say anything at all, and Kezia did not either. Hannah put the basket down where the food was going, and took a turf off the barrow and worked the north face of that clamp until 4 in the morning with the women from Snow's Fields, and went home at first light, and came back the next night, and that was the whole of their reconciliation, and neither of them ever referred to it again as long as they lived. On the 17th, in the afternoon between the tally and the clamps, Kezia Furlong walked the 4 miles over to Sember Green, and asked to see Lady Selina Otway. She was kept waiting 11 minutes, which was civil, and shown into a very handsome room with a great deal of new gilding in it, and Lady Selina came in, and was perfectly pleasant, and rang for tea. She was 29, and extremely pretty, in a fair, tired way, and she looked at Kezia's hands for about a second and a half, and then never looked at them again, which Kezia thought was probably the most skilful thing she had ever seen anybody do. Kezia said what she had come to say. She did not bring the drafts, and she did not threaten with them, and she said so at the start, and she watched Lady Selina understand that she was not being blackmailed, and decide visibly that this was going to be worse. "You wrote to him first," Kezia said. "He has never said so. He never will." "I found the proofs in a paper file behind the 1811 vouchers, and my husband would have burnt them if he had known where they were. And I am not going to use them, and I want you to know that they exist, and that I am not going to use them, because I think you should have to carry both of those things at once." Lady Selina Otway put her cup down. "What is it that you want, Duchess?" "Nothing you will give me. One sentence in front of the factors at the borough would be worth £9,000, and I know exactly what it would cost you, and I would not pay it either." Kezia stood up. "I came because he has spent 9 years being sorry for you, and there is not one person alive who has ever been sorry for him, and I wanted somebody in this county besides me to know what he did. That is all. You may have the tea." She was at the door when Lady Selina said, in a perfectly steady voice, "I was 20. "So was I once," Kezia said. "And so was he. And he went up a burning stair 3 times when he was 23, and the 3rd time was for a lad from your own village that he could not get, and he has never mentioned that either. Good afternoon, my lady." Otway's men were on the Ockenden road that evening, counting the wagons, and the clamps burned on. The wind went into the northeast on the night of the 19th. Kezia felt it change at 9:30, standing on the cooling floor, before anybody told her, the cowl on no. 5 came round on its spindle with the little groan it always made, and she went out into the yard and stood in the dark and put her wet hand up. 9 loads in the green store, 2 clamps drawn, and 1 to open in the morning. 4 kilns going, and every one of them full. And 6 hours of dark, and after the dark another 14 loads coming down the hill. She lit no. 3 at 10 o'clock. She sent Jarvis Coldman to bed, and would not be argued with. She put the 2 lads on the cooling floor at the far end of the store, and told them not to come up the stair for any reason whatever. She soaked a hair cloth in the trough, and folded it into 4, and laid it by the drop hole, and set a bucket beside her foot, and spread the load, and sulphured it, and brought the fire up slow, and stood on a cloth floor over a fire in a kiln with a fault in its shaft, in a northeast wind, exactly as her father had stood 11 years running. Rafe came up at 11:10. "Get off my floor," she said. "No, it is my floor. It is the 2nd term, and you signed it." "The 2nd term says nobody countermands you on the drying floor," he said. "I have not countermanded anything. I have brought you a lantern, and I am going to stand at the head of that stair until this load is made, and you may put it in the book that I disobeyed you and dock me a shilling. Rafe, you know what this kiln does." "I know exactly what this kiln does," said the Duke of Ockenden. "I am the only living person who has seen it do it. It came at 10 minutes to 2 in the morning. There was no warning that anyone who had not been listening for it would have caught. Only the note of the draw changing, going soft and hollow for half a second like somebody taking a breath. And Kezia was already moving before she had thought about it, and the flame came up through the drop hole in a lick, as long as her arm, and stood there, and she put the wet cloth on it with both hands and her whole weight, and it went out with a noise like a cough. The load did not take. That was the whole of it. 3 seconds, and a scorch mark on the haircloth the size of a dinner plate, and 40 pounds of hops on the edge of the hole, gone red and worthless, and no more. She was on her knees on the cloth, with her hands still on it, when she realized Rafe was down beside her holding the other half, with his gloved left hand flat on the wet cloth in the middle, where the heat was worst, and the glove was smoking. "Take it off," she said. "Take it off, it does not feel anything," he said. That is the one useful thing about it. They got the load off at 4. It made, all but the red edge, and it was a good load, and she stood on the cooling floor at 4:30 in the morning of the 20th of September, with her hair stuck to her face, and shook so hard she had to sit down on the pocket press. Rafe sat down beside her, on her right, which put her on his left, and she did not think he had done it on purpose, and she was wrong. She took his left hand and pulled the glove off. He let her. He did not help her, and he did not stop her, and afterwards she thought that the not stopping her was the largest thing anybody had ever done for her. She held it in both of hers and turned it over in the lantern light, and looked at it properly for the first time. The drawn tendons, the smooth silvered skin across the back of it, the 2 fingers that would not open, the palm that had gone up a stair 3 times in 1808 and had been in a black glove ever since, in every drawing room and every church and every dinner in 9 years, so that nobody would have to look at it over the soup. She did not say anything about it. She did not say it was not so bad, because it was. She did not say it did not matter, because it did. She put her mouth against the back of it and held it there, and the 2 of them sat on the pocket press in the smell of sulphur and hop dust while the lantern burned down, and neither of them said one word until the first wagon came down the hill at 6. The last bine on Ockenden ground was pulled at 4:20 on the afternoon of the 21st of September, 1817, and the last load came off 4:10 the following night, and Kezia Furlong put her fist round a handful of it and let go, and it sprang back and stood up in her palm, and the stalk snapped between her fingers with a small dry crack like a wren's bone. "She's made," she said to nobody, in an empty kiln, and then sat down on the floor and cried for about 90 seconds, which was all the time she had. 1,690 pockets went into the store. Not one of them was smoked. Chestnut charcoal off Barnfield, burned in 4 clamps by 211 pickers, and 3 old men from Sember and a woman in black who never said a word, burns as clean as anything Otway ever bought. The borough hop market was held in Southwark on the 29th of September, Michaelmas Day, and the Duke of Ockenden went up to it and stood at his own sample for the first time in 9 years. He had a pocket cut open on the trestle, and the pale gold hops loose on a white cloth, and he stood behind it bareheaded in the flat autumn light, with the whole left side of his face turned to the room. And the factors came along the row, and stopped, and put a hand in, and squeezed and smelt it, and looked at him. The word was all ready, round. Otway was a Southwark factor himself. He had been in that hall since the Tuesday. Ockenden hops, dried by the drier's daughter on cracked kilns. Home burnt wood off the estate. A very sad business, and one must be careful, and no doubt his Grace believes it is sound. Mr. Ganby of Tooley Street, who bought for 3 London brewers, and had bought Ockenden hops from Samuel Furlong for 19 years, put his hand into the sample, and squeezed it, and let it go, and watched it stand up. That is the best sample on this floor, he said, and there are 1,690 pockets behind it. Are there, your Grace? And there it was, the whole trade, in one question, in a room where a man's word was the only thing being sold. The Duke of Ockenden opened his mouth, and before he had got a syllable out, a voice from the back of the hall said, "There are 1,690, and I picked 411 bushel of them myself, and I know it because it was read out loud to me every night, for 21 nights." Bet Rackstraw had brought 40 families up out of Bermondsey. They were standing along the whole east wall of the hop market in their working clothes, with their hands still brown to the elbow, because it was Michaelmas, and they had come up from Kent 3 days before, and had not gone home yet, and Bet Rackstraw came down the middle of that floor with the Ockenden tally book under her arm, and put it on the trestle in front of Mr. Ganby of Tooley Street, and opened it. Every count wrote down and said out loud in the open air at 6 o'clock, 21 evenings. In front of the whole ground, she said, "Any man here may find his own family's name in it. There is 31 of us in this room that heard it said. Ask any of them, and if you will not take our word for it, sir, then I do not know what you think you are buying." Nobody in the borough hop market had ever seen anything remotely like it. Mr. Ganby of Tooley Street looked at the book for a while. "Well," he said, "that is a great deal better than a gentleman's word, is it not?" The whole of it went that morning, 1,690 pockets, at £8 the hundredweight, which was the highest price paid in that hall in 1817, and the 3rd highest paid anywhere in England that year. Silas Otway's own hops went at £7.6, and Silas Otway stood at the end of the row and watched it happen, and said nothing, and had the good sense not to. The bond was paid the next morning in his own counting house in notes on the table, and there was a very great deal left over. Before he went out of that hall, Rafe Anstey did one more thing, and he had not told his wife he was going to do it. He put his hand on the trestle and said, in a flat carrying voice, that in the September of 1808 he had carried Samuel Furlong out of a kiln on his own ground, that he had never said so in 9 years, because he could not say it without saying whose fire it was, and Furlong had a family, that Furlong was now dead and had told his daughter, and so he was free to say it, and he wished it entered in the market book. Then he picked up his hat. He did not mention Selina Verrall. He never did, in his whole life. The new ironwork went into No. 3 that November, and the shaft was taken down to the ground and built again, and the 11 pockets came out of the great hall, and in the spring of 1818 the Duchess of Ockenden had callers. A great many of them. Some of them were people who had been very sorry for her at the church gate in August, and she was perfectly civil to every one, and Mrs. Brenchley had to buy a second tray. A letter came in the March. 1 line, no signature, in a fair lady's hand I wrote to him first. Rafe read it twice, standing at the window. Then he folded it and put it in the fire, and Kezia, sitting on his left, with the estate books open in front of her, did not say one word. And that was the end of that. The picking of 1818 began on the 2nd of September. 240 came down. Bet Rackstraw with 23 families, and the Doggets, and the whole of Little Sember, and 11 new families out of Deptford, who had heard in the borough what was read out loud in the great garden at 6 o'clock every evening. Hannah Furlong was on the cooling floor that year, at £40 and a cottage, and would not be thanked for it. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, on the 11th of September, on the bench outside the Stokehall with the fires banked and the 5 white cowls standing black against the first grey of it, the Duke of Ockenden sat down on his wife's right, so that she was on his left, where she had sat since the first meal she ever ate in his house. He had no glove on. He had not worn one indoors since the 20th of September 1817. Kezia took a handful of the last load out of her apron pocket, closed her fist on it, and opened her hand between them. It sprang back and stood up. "She's made," she said.